heard the podcast on what sags at menopause or watched the video on what sags at menopause, be sure you do so because you will understand fully exactly why you leak. And the last symptom-like thing that disappears is your sex drive. Now, if you look at a graph of your hormones at postmenopause, you'll see that your testosterone practically disappears about 2 years after your last period. And that's when your sex drive disappears. In women, much of our sex drive is dependent on estrogen, but some of it is dependent on testosterone. And so when that testosterone disappears, sometimes the sex drive disappears. Okay, now that does it for the symptoms, but what about the long-term disease stuff? What disappears that results in a life-threatening situation at menopause? Your bones. Disappearance of your bones is called osteoporosis. So before menopause, your bones look like little tiny spaces with little tiny pores in them. But after you lose your estrogen, the holes in your bone, the pores grow. So they start looking like Swiss cheese with great big holes in it because there's less bone there. Your bone quite literally disappears. And it's all because your estrogen disappears. And guess what? With your brain, it's the same story. And the very reason your brain disappears is because it is shrinking, and it shrinks because it's disappearing. Purely, simply, and unfortunately, you literally lose brain tissue. That's what leads to Alzheimer's disease. This is why more women have Alzheimer's than men. Now, why does this happen? And it's because of the disappearance of estrogen. Once again, the loss of estrogen is the culprit. You see how many things estrogen affects? Isn't it shocking? Okay, now for a couple of social matters that disappear. I guess the most obvious is your children. They disappear from your nest, which leads to disappearance of a lot of your identity and your roles. This is what empty nest syndrome is all about. And for some women, it leaves a great big hole in their lives because they spent most of their lives focusing on their children and feeling a sense of need and their full identity based on what they did for their children and as a mother. So empty nest syndrome. But there's another thing that disappears at menopause. And I'm actually glad to end on this note in terms of the list of things because I like to start on a good note. I like to end on a good note. We started with disappearance of your periods, which is pleasant for most women. And I want to end on another good note, which is disappearance of insecurity. That's one of the things that disappears at menopause. Have you ever noticed how secure menopausal women are? I mean, they're really more secure than ever before. I create what I like to call this disappearance of insecurity is menopower. Because when you start becoming secure, you have a lot of power. So despite all these disappearing acts that I've talked about earlier, some of these things that disappear are for the better. And disappearance of your insecurity is by definition one of the best ones. So here's a summary of all the things that disappear at menopause. Your periods, your sleep, your memory, your even temper, your rejection of alcohol, your soft skin, your hair, your vaginal thickness, wrinkles, and lubrication, your waistline, your urinary control, your sex drive, your bones, your brain, your children, and your insecurity. Do you see how these WHAM podcasts are helping you connect the dots to get the big picture. I really love looking at things from different perspectives, and I had so much fun coming up with these different categories. And the interesting thing was, I get an idea, and it just plays on my brain, and I just get all excited about it, and I start working on it, working on it, working on it. And as I was putting this together, every single category, every single theme kept growing and growing and growing. I kept realizing how many more things there were in each theme than I had originally thought about when I first came up with the idea. I was just shocked at how every single WHAM series of themes kept growing and growing. And so I love doing this, and women have just responded to it with just thrill, because it has enabled them to get the big picture without any of the details or minutia. And sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes, they say you can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes you get so bogged down in something that's detailed that you don't see the big picture. And so I'm really enjoying doing these for you. And there's a few more coming up. The next one will be what gets better at menopause. And see, that one will make you happy. Some of these have possibly made you mad, but that one will make you very happy. But the key is to understand that there are themes. Please go watch some of my videos. And if you do watch the videos on YouTube, the channel is Menopause Taylor. Watch them in order. Anything you do with this education requires order. And I know that most things in life these days, people don't think about there needing to be any order to anything. But you cannot get any kind of real education if you don't do things in order. You can't learn to read until you learn the alphabet first. You can't learn anything if you don't have a foundation for learning it. When women jump around all willy-nilly with my videos or the webinars or a podcast or anything, they get a piece of information, they get some facts here and there, but they don't know how to put them into context. And what I do with all of my educational resources is I focus on giving them to you in an order that is precisely perfect for your understanding. I'm a pedantic, anal, neurotic nerd. I do everything in a very orderly, structured fashion. Nothing in my life involves winging it. Well, that's very beneficial for you. All you have to do is take advantage of the fact that I have a compulsion to be so orderly and structured, because you don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to answer your questions before you even have an opportunity to ask them. I think of everything. I make sure I come at everything in every which way so that you don't have anything left to be wondering about. I make sure that I address everything fully. This is just the way my brain works, and it benefits you, even though it may be annoying to some. I think for educational purposes, it's the best way to go. So if you just do whatever you're going to do for this education in order, you will be just fine, because you will understand everything, and you will not have any concern with connecting the dots or figuring out what relates to what. You won't confuse yourself. I will debunk all your misinformation as we move along. So I thank you for listening. Please come back next time for What Gets Better at Menopause, also part of the WHAM series. Go to my website, menopausetaylor.me, and come back next time for the next podcast. I will see you then. Bye-bye now.